Kära publik, varmt välkomna till Uppsala stadsteater och denna fantastiska kväll på vår minsta scen Intiman och litteraturfestivalen. Anledningen till att jag får säga välkommen är för att jag heter Petra Brylander och jag är teaterchef här. Ha en riktigt fin kväll då.
Tack Petra. Ja, välkomna till Uppsala internationella litteraturfestival. Vi är glada att ha vår ordentliga invigning här ikväll på Uppsala stadsteater. Vi tjuvstartade igår på Akademibokhandeln och vi kommer fortsätta här imorgon på teatern och också på Uppsala konstmuseum. Uppsala internationella litteraturfestival startade 2018 av initiativtagare Khulud Sagir. Och vi är tacksamma för att vi fick förtroendet av Kulturrådet och Uppsala kommun att göra det. Vi vill förutom att tacka dem också tacka våra samarbetspartner här, våra scener som jag nämnde, men också Svenska Penn som vi har ett mångårigt samarbete med. Vi är en litteraturfestival som vill lyfta upp litteratur och författarskap och erfarenheter från kultursfärer som kanske inte alltid får självklar plats i vår kulturliv. Vi lyfter fram författare som vi tycker sätter ord på komplexiteten i vår värld och vår tid. Varje år så har vi valt ett tema och i år så är temat hembygd. Det är på tyska vi säger Heimat. Och aldrig hade vi väl kunnat föreställa oss hur fasansfullt aktuellt den frågan om hemhörighet skulle vara i detta nu. Då miljontals människor är på flykt och hem läggs i ruiner. Vi har i samband med de rådande omständigheterna som är valt att ge alla biljettintäkter för festivalen till Svenska Penns akutfond för kollegor inom det litterära fältet som befinner sig i en svår situation till följd av hot, förföljelse och fängslanden. Och just nu så ser vi ju ett akut behov i Ukraina. Svenska Penn är i kontakt med ukrainska Penn som fortfarande är på plats och försöker stötta verksamma skribenter. Och vill du också ge ett bidrag så kan du göra det genom att swisha på 900 5091. Alltså swish 900 5091. Märk betalningen akutfonden så kommer den absolut rätt. Ja, men till årets invigningstal. Invigningstalare är Göran Rosenberg, författare och journalist. Och han kommer alltså tala på detta tema som vi har. Göran Rosenberg är en av våra skarpaste samhällskritiker och debattörer. Han har varit verksam i radio och tv, en bredd av tidningar. Han har varit utrikeskorrespondent och programledare på tv, liksom chefredaktör för Moderna Tider. Och för sin journalistik så har han tilldelat såväl Stora journalistpriset som Publicistklubbens stora pris. Därtill är han också författare och belönas bland annat med Augustpriset i skönlitteratur för boken om hans far, ett kort uppehåll från Auschwitz. Inte minst i oroliga tider så behöver vi ju människor som lyfter blicken. Som ser och förmår sätta ord på det de ser. Göran Rosenberg är en av dessa. Han är en röst att vända sig till för perspektiv. En röst som inte förenklar men ändå alltid är tydlig. Han är en av dem som är det där finaste man kan säga om en person i offentligheten. En intellektuellt hederlig. Och vi är mycket glada och tacksamma över att ha dig här, Göran. Men då vi har internationella gäster med oss här idag, fler författare som ska vara under festivalen, så kommer det här framförandet hållas på engelska. So as we have international guests with us, we will turn to English and say a very warm welcome to you who have come far to join us. The opening speech of the 2022 Uppsala International Literature Festival is on the theme Home, Heimat. It will be held by the much acclaimed writer and journalist Göran Rosenberg. And after his speech, he will be joined by journalist Mikael Olsson Al-Safandi for a further conversation on the topic. So, welcome all of you, and big warm welcome to Göran.
I had intended to stand and give a loud speech because I thought we would be in a great auditorium in a theater. But I really enjoy this intimate setting, and because of that, I'm going to sit down and speak a little quieter, perhaps, than I had intended. I also welcome all those, hopefully, that are watching this on the internet, because this is, as you should know, a very exclusive and intimate little setting. So, yeah. Okay. So, Cecilia, first of all, thank you for that introduction. I'm still blushing. That was really nice. And of course, also for the reminder, which I would have done anyway, that this topic is more timely than any one of us had expected. Unfortunately, more timely than any one of us would have expected. With the willful and brutal mass destruction of homes and lives that we haven't seen on the European continent since World War II. And I don't think any of us, 1 month ago or 1 month and a half ago, could have imagined that this would come back to us in the midst of Europe. And if Putin wins this war of destruction, for millions of people, there will be no home to return to, not only in the physical sense, but in a more profound existential sense, of which I will speak more. Since what we mean by home, or what I mean by home, is something more than a roof over your head. And a place called home is more than a place. But it is, in my view, still a place. And this is where I will start, because I have to admit that I have an obsession with place, and most so with the place of my childhood. There have been other places in my life, to be sure, and to some of them I'm attached with lasting bonds of memory. But the place where I first saw the world and saw everything for the first time and gave everything its first name has remained a place of deep significance to me. Perhaps this is a personal oddity, having to do much with the peculiarities of my biography. Or perhaps it's just a matter of character, mine being of a more place-bound variety. There are certainly people who appear to be at home anywhere, and who would consider my obsession with place atavistic and obsolete. But, and if not plain reactionary, I can hear that too. In a rapidly globalizing world, the attachment to place and a quest for home associated with it had often come to be considered a primitive remnant from a pre-globalized era of limited mobility and local horizons, a lingering sentiment of nostalgia that may all too easily become the source of populist resentment, ethnic nationalism, and xenophobic fear. The German word Heimat, with its historical connotation to the cornerstone of Nazi ideology, Blut und Boden, blood and soil, undoubtedly impregnates the notion of home with the sentiments, if not the sentimentality, of attachment and belonging. and there is no denying the destructive potential of Heimat in the history of Europe. One might perhaps argue that this notion of home is a peculiar product of German culture and history, since it seems to have no equivalent in English. Homeland, fatherland, or motherland may have similar ethnic and nationalist connotations, but they lack that specific spatial, roomly character that Heimat has, a physical and human landscape to which our sense of home is attached. A home can certainly be many things, but the physical and human environment in which we evolve into human beings and make our way into the world is arguably a place that will stay with us and form us, whether we are aware of it or not. The place we call home is then not any place, and it's not always possible to fully replace it if we lose it, especially if it has been brutally and willfully humiliated and destroyed. The loss of home, in that sense, I once wrote, is the loss of a place where you don't have to say very much to be understood, and you don't have to make yourself too visible to be seen. Home as a place of belonging, of community, of common memory. Home as Heimat, and there is unfortunately no better word for it. Heimat as a word for an existential human need, as I see it, that cannot be done away with, in whatever language you may express it. In my childhood memoir about my father, who survived Auschwitz and tried to make a new home for himself in Sweden, I wanted to give words to the homelessness that was his. And in this I was helped by his co-survivor of Auschwitz, the Austrian Jewish writer Hans Meyer. After the war, Hans Meyer changed his name to Jean Amery. It's an anagram. As a reaction to having been deprived not only of his home, but also of the language in which he had made himself at home in the world, and which was now the language in which he had been made homeless in the world. Homelessness runs like a deep undercurrent through Amery's writing. One of his essays is entitled, "How much home does a man need?" And his word for home remains Heimat. He who once has lost it remains a loser, even when he has learned not to stumble about in foreign land as if he were drunk, but has learned to put his foot down on the ground with a certain boldness. Wie viel Heimat braucht der Mensch? Emery asks. How much home does a man need? The more, the less she can take with her, he replies. Jean Amery had no home at all to take with him, and neither did my father. With no links left to the landscape of childhood and youth, and with a weakened ability to reconnect with the world, homelessness can become an unbearable condition, Amery wrote. So it was for him, and so it was for my father. And at the end, neither of them could bear living with it. And perhaps it's only by imagining ourselves in a situation like theirs, banished from and abandoned by the world to which they thought they belonged, that we can fully understand the continued importance of Heimat in human life. The philosopher Hannah Arendt understood this very well from her own experience. Having been shut out of the German home to which she thought she belonged in 1933, having seen her friends and colleagues close their doors on her, she knew very well what it meant to lose the ground under the feet. It was as if a void had formed around me, she would say in an interview much later. This void, the experience of being homeless in her own country, can perhaps be seen as the background to her deep involvement in the issue of homelessness. Or more specifically, in the issue of statelessness, the form of homelessness born out of the 20th century breakdown of Europe into more or less ethnic nation states by means of massacre, genocide, and ethnic cleansing. Statelessness was a historically new condition, Arendt wrote, with millions of people without a home anywhere, at the mercy of societies in which they had no given place, which was what was historically new, Arendt argued, was not the loss of home itself, but the impossibility of finding a new one. Suddenly, she writes, there was no place on earth to which migrants could go without the most severe restrictions. People who had become stateless had lost not only their home, but also the whole social structure into which they had been born, in which they had created for themselves a specific place in the world. In a humanity that had entirely organized itself within the framework of nation states, the loss of home and political status could mean expulsion from humanity altogether, Arendt wrote. I think today that we can see what she meant. Again, on the European continent, the specter of millions of people driven from their homes willfully and brutally destroyed and humiliated, the ground under their feet being literally blown to pieces. And again, we are reminded in the most brutal way of the perhaps most basic of human conditions, the existence of a place in the world that you can be, in which you can be at home. And again, we are reminded in the most brutal way that Europe is a continent, as someone has put it, of too many homes on too little space. And thus a continent that with the fate of trying to find an order in which these homes can exist side by side without one home going to war with another, which European history largely has been about. If Putin is allowed to win this war, that is, if he by military might and nuclear blackmail and through the destruction of millions of homes and displacement of millions of people will manage to impose his will on Ukraine, then what is lost for the foreseeable future is a human order based on the idea that might does not make right, and with it the idea of Europe, of many nations and homes, a multitude of Heimat, large and small, strong and weak, living side by side in peace and security. Which brings me to the protagonist of my recent book, Rabbi Marcus Ehrenpreis' Obesvarade kärlek, The Unrequited Love of Rabbi Marcus Ehrenpreis, which very much is a book about Europe in a time of the most radical and brutal home destruction in the name of one Heimat against another. Marcus Ehrenpreis was a remarkable man, I must say, and his life and work makes for a remarkable story, if I may say so. Not least, though, the story of his lifelong struggle for a world in which minorities and majorities could be able to live in peace together, or where the wolf will live with the lamb, as he liked to quote the prophet Isaiah, by which he meant a society in which being a minority would not be seen as an anomaly or a threat, but as a fundamental state of human existence. A society in which you should love the stranger as thyself, as he also liked to quote Leviticus, Tredje Mosebok. This had, of course, to do with the Jews being the emblematic minority of Europe, for almost 2,000 years living in exile or in a diaspora as a people among people, in a time of emerging nation-state nationalism, which was also a time of rising anti-Semitism, and a time of bloody European wars in which borders and people were moved and removed along ethnic and cultural lines, and minorities were turned into majorities, and majorities were turned into minorities again. Which is what Marcus Ehrenpreis had seen happening during his time as the Grand Rabbi of Bulgaria between 1900 and 1914, where he had literally been at the front of the Balkan Wars of 1912 and 1913. And as the new chief rabbi of Stockholm, he had been deeply involved in the massive dislocations and persecutions of people and minorities in Eastern Europe during and following World War I, not least hundreds of thousands of Jews. This was a Europe ripe with new wars, Marcus Ehrenpreis feared, with more dislocation and more destruction. And although he could not yet foresee how the horrors, could you foresee how horrible the destruction of the Second World War II and the Holocaust would be, he saw what was at stake, not only for the Jews, but for Europe as a whole. In 1946, after Europe had all but destroyed its Jews and itself, including the home, or Heimat, into which Ehrenpreis himself had been born, the city which today is Lviv in Ukraine, and once was Lemberg in Austria-Hungary, and once was Lvov in Russia and Poland. In 1946, he saw it clearly, he wrote. The question was then, and is still now, and will be even more acute tomorrow. Can a new order be instituted in the world in which ethnic and territorial borders will be made to coincide? And if this cannot be done, and hardly anyone in his right mind believes that it can, should any country have the right by divine and human law to deprive the minorities living within its borders, people of a different historical origin and of different faith from that of the ruling majority, of their freedom and life opportunities? There is sometimes a tendency to romanticize exile, which to me is homelessness by another name. It is of course true that exile can provide a new home and a new language and a new ground under your feet, and that homelessness in this sense will become a fading memory. And it's also true that exile and homelessness can inspire to great art and literature. We all know that. Among those millions now seeing their homes destroyed and the ground at their feet blown away, there will be also poets and writers. Which brings me back to the question that Ehrenpreis was ultimately posing, and which I have been dealing with for most of my life, based on the experience and collective memory of what a Heimat of blood and soil and war can lead to. Are we capable of creating a human order, a society in which our need for Heimat, for recognition and belonging, can be satisfied without setting one Heimat against another? My strong support for the project of a European Union has been based on this. The European order that eventually emerged from two near-fatal European disasters in less than 30 years has been the most ambitious and certainly the most legitimate and peaceful attempt in European history to create a common political order for the multitude of peoples on this small and fractious peninsula on the western tip of the Eurasian continent. Having convincingly demonstrated their recurrent capacity for self-destruction, the embattled remnants of Europe seemed prepared to learn the lesson. Either they bind themselves together or they self-destruct together. During the brief era of triumphant globalization, with its promises of frictionless communications and increasingly borderless world, it was tempting to render obsolete the rootedness of human existence in particular settings and circumstances. Human capital was to become as mobile as financial, human individuals as free to roam the globe as the goods and services they produced and consumed. The perks of the global village would inexorably reduce the significance of place-bound communities. Well, we all now know that this hasn't happened and couldn't happen. While a more globalized and multicultural social order might have seemed a logical step for an ever more interdependent and interconnected humankind, there can be no globalization, I believe, without societies that are able to provide their members with a community to which they may belong and a place in which they may feel at home. Human formation can take place under the most diverse circumstances and produce the most diverse human beings, but it cannot reasonably take place without the intimate physical and emotional interaction with the people who happen to inhabit the particular world into which each and every one of us, without being asked, is being born into. To feel at home in the larger world, we must first make ourselves at home in the small world of our first encounters and impressions. When Antoine Saint-Exupéry's Petit Prince, Little Prince, learns that the world is full of roses, like his first rose on his own planet, he lies down and cries, "I thought that I was rich with a flower that was unique in all the world, and all I had was a common rose." The little prince has attached himself to one particular rose, not to all the roses of the world. In the same way, I believe, as we must attach ourselves to particular people and things before we can attach ourselves to the world at large. And similarly, being disconnected from those first attachments and forever losing them in one way or another might become a source of deep longing and mourning. So here we are again, in the worst outbreak of European self-destruction since World War II. But I do believe, no, I must believe that this will end in a defeat for this attempt to reintroduce into Europe and into the world a human order in which, as Thucydides said 2,500 years ago, the strong do what they can, the weak endure what they must. No, this must not be allowed to win. Although the only thing we know for certain is that any future of something called Europe is the future of many homes, densely packed, historically intertwined, inherently diverse, either creating for themselves a common order or a common disaster. So to conclude, I find the theme of this festival, as I said, very timely and necessary, and its significance certainly better understood today than a month ago, and to which the poetry and literature of exile, loss and memory will again have to testify, as did the German Jewish poet Nelly Sachs in her Swedish exile, writing in 1945 to those having to build themselves a new home. An euch, die das neue Haus bauen. And I will read it in the language of the Heimat of Nelly Sachs. Wenn du dir deine Wände neu aufrichtest, deinen Herd, Schlafstatt, Tisch und Stuhl, hänge nicht deine Tränen um sie, die dahingegangenen, die nicht mehr mit dir wohnen werden, an den Stein, nicht an das Holz. Es weint sonst in deinen Schlaf hinein, des Kurzen, den du noch tun musst. Och i Margareta Holmqvist, and in the Swedish translation of Margareta Holmqvist, I will not burden you with my English translation, which you will find in the new publication of collected poems of Nelly Sachs at Phaeton förlag. När du bygger upp dina väggar på nytt, din spis, sovplats, bord och stol, bind dem inte med dina tårar, de hädangångna, som inte mer ska bo med dig. I stenen, inte vid träd. Annars tränger gråten in i din sömn, den korta som du ändå måste få.
Okay, so thank you so much, Göran. Do you know what moves me with not only what you write, but when I hear you? You know that? No, it's in your writing as well. In this time of shallow, often like short news and entertainment and stuff. You have this language of uncompromising seriousness, and I love it.
Thank you. It's not boring though.
Not at all boring. Not at all boring.
Okay.
And I'll tell you all that, and I'll put them here.
Yeah.
This is examples of that. This is the latest. The book Rabbi Marcus Ehrenpreis Obesvarade kärlek.
Yeah.
And this is the book, the novel, the book that came before that. A brief stop actually on the road from Auschwitz, and it is available in English and German and French and whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
It's my bestseller.
Yeah. It's a beautiful book and a very moving one. Okay, you've been as a journalist, presenter, and interviewer on TV, foreign correspondent, filmmaker, editor-in-chief, columnist, and essayist. You've touched on issues like this, on home, nation, identity, from several perspectives, and not least in the August Prize-winning book about your father. In it, you tell about the fate of your parents, uprooted from their children and youth homes in Poland, then concentration camps, to finally establish themselves in Södertälje. And you mentioned in your speech here that your father felt forever homeless. But your mother, did she ever feel at home in Sweden? Did she ever?
Through her children, I think, more than anything else. I can say that she never, and this I know now for a fact, never overcome really her fear, to put it frankly.
For what? Fear for what?
Fear for everything would come back again. When we emptied her apartment and her husband's apartment a few years after my book came out, it was full of preserves, full of inläggningar and
food and stuff.
Ärtsoppa, whatever. So this I didn't realize, but I do think, and it goes to for many of the survivors of their kind who lost really everything, that they made fantastically well in Sweden. But I think the sense of home was attached to the children more than to themselves. They didn't feel that security. And
how come your father didn't feel that?
Yeah, well, you have to read the book. I don't want to tell you how it ends.
No.
But as I mentioned, of course, he was some didn't manage, didn't survive, and there were many things they didn't survive. They didn't survive the memories, they didn't find the sense of guilt, and they didn't survive the loneliness that comes with being thrown out of the world, which they really were, out of it, everything. That's what the Nazis did, more thorough, perhaps at least, very thoroughly, to disconnect their victims from the world, make them dehumanize them. And part of that was, of course, taking their homes away. That it started with that. They drove them out of their homes and put them first in ghettos, and then they killed them. But the home, they had to abandon them. And we can see, I mentioned that there is this dimension to home that is not purely physical, but has to do with so many other things that are attached to the place, but are not physical. And when everything of that also is gone, people, memories, everything, it's very hard. It's very hard to rebuild a home again. It will always be something lesser than the home they had.
You yourself, you said in a speech at the Swedish National Day in Södertälje, the Swedish town, 13 years ago.
My place.
Yeah. You yourself confessed a kind of belonging or special relationship to that city.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The first chapter in that book is called The Place.
Yeah.
It's the name of the chapter, and it's about the place.
Yeah.
And the place was very important to me, and I thought that I, through the place, would get to know my father, because I
He
didn't.
worked there and stuff.
Yeah, well, we lived together there, so I thought that maybe because he was dead and he didn't leave much behind, and I was a young boy, but maybe the things of the place would awake memories of him in me.
Did it?
Which it did, yeah. The book very much is based on a child's memories. You know, not very reliable all the time, but still. So if I would term this book, it's a childhood memoir more
Did
than
you
anything
go
else.
there
Of
in order
course.
to write the book?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And I was totally obsessed. I rented an apartment which I didn't stay in very much, just to be there. And I had a very strong. It has weakened a bit since the book came out, but I was truly obsessed with it. And I don't think the book had been written the way if I hadn't been.
No. In that speech, you also on the National Day, you also said that quote, "I have thought a lot about what it is that makes us feel connected to other people. Yeah, with people other than those close to us, with people we don't know personally." How do you think about that today? What is it that makes us feel connected, as you did in Södertälje, for example?
Well, the answer is different, but the whole way we build our societies, or ideally we build our societies, that we connect to the larger world from a smaller world. We enlarge our circle. And it's an issue of enlarging our trust in other people. And eventually we enlarge it to the extent that we trust people that we don't know, and that's also called nation building. And that was the good thing about building the nation state, at least in the Swedish case. It has, you can say a lot about it, but it managed to enlarge this circle of trust in other people and the sense of belonging to a circle that was larger than the village, larger than the family, larger than the tribe. And to jump into what I said recently, I had hoped not that the European Union would become anything like a nation state or a home of that kind, but that it would manage to pursue this trust-building project beyond the nation state, because we needed that. We still need it. We might not be able to do it because it's difficult. It's very easy to close the door and be afraid and say these people threaten me and I have to secure my own and I don't trust you and so forth and so. This happens. But the ideal thing is to enlarge this circle of trust, or I have written in another essay, the warm circle to ever larger. It will not be as warm in the outskirts, as at home, of course.
No.
But it could still work. That's what I hoped. I think what is happening now could paradoxically help us realize that this is what we have to do. Maybe this is the moment of truth.
A crisis we learn from.
Maybe, hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
This circle of trust and feeling of connection has become an actuality in the debate over refugees in Europe and Sweden. Leading politicians now explain in Europe the difference between the now open doors for Ukrainian refugees compared to Afghan, Syrian and Iraqi ones that ran into closed ones, that we are closer to the Ukrainians. I suspect that we trust them more. We have a stronger affiliation. What do you say about that?
Yeah, I think we should have a principled policy of refugees.
Do you think there's something to it?
Yeah, there is of course something to it. You feel more affection for your children than for some children elsewhere, but then you have principles. Then you have the rule of law. You cannot say I take you because I like you better. That's not how rule of law works. We should have an asylum system that treats everybody equally. Now, having said that, we have an emergency now. This is And we had an emergency with the Syrian war too. Don't forget, that was an emergency.
And the Iraqi war.
Yeah, there was some problems with the way we handled this, I think, because we somehow mixed up very sort of, what ska man säga, behjärtansvärda, I don't know, forgot the word, reasons for people to leave their homes in seeking of a better future, like from Africa, poverty, whatever.
Yeah.
And the acute need for shelter, protection, which is the asylum rights. And there was a mix-up there, and I think we should be clearer on this point. And because for the sake of the refugee, we have to concentrate all our efforts to those who need our help most. And so I think it was blurred originally, and so everyone
became illegal immigrants.
Yeah, well, everybody came an asylum seeker, or at least potentially an asylum seeker. We should be more careful about this to protect the asylum right. I think what we are doing now is fantastic. I think this will also open our eyes. We can, if we want. Now there are 76,000 places already available for Ukrainian refugees in Sweden only.
Yeah.
So we can do that.
Yeah.
We could. So. This is a discussion that we need to on basis of this experience, need to further, of course. Yeah. But it also tells us that we cannot live on thinking that we can close the borders on the world. We cannot do that. We are part of it, and especially in a time like this, when we are physically should feel a bit threatened, a bit in danger, and the only way of defending ourselves is together with other nations, we cannot do it on ourselves. This whole order that we have lived in, we forget it was an order that protected the weak against the strong. The strong in Europe actually voluntarily folded into this system. Germany, which is by far the strongest nation, acquiesced to an order in which the weak, the smaller nations, have principally the same voice in common matter.
Yeah.
But we have, I think in Sweden we haven't really understood
realized that. No. In a speech today, you said that humanity that has entirely organized itself within the framework of nation states, the loss of home and political status, and you quoted Hannah Arendt.
That's Hannah Arendt, I think.
Yeah,
quoting her. Yeah.
Could mean expulsion from humanity altogether.
Yeah, that's Hannah Arendt. Yeah.
Is it where a lot of humans living in Europe find themselves today?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say so. The paperless, the people who are stateless, in a limbo in a camp somewhere on a Greek island or in Calais.
Do you
they are outside. They are outside humanity.
Do you see a way where they can create a home within Europe?
Yeah, you must help them do that. This is the thing. We must, in a way, organize or reorganize our societies to accommodate for a different situation than the nostalgia for the homogeneous nation state, which always was a pipe dream, but which, of course, in Sweden is represented by the Sweden Democrats. But it's sort of has crept into the discussion. Yeah. This is not we cannot organize societies. This is the time for that, if there ever was such a time, is gone. Yeah. So now how do we organize a good society where people are not fighting each other? We don't have ethnic and religious and other conflicts, or at least learn how to manage them in a decent way. This is what we should strive for.
Although the tendencies nowadays seem to go the opposite direction somewhat. I mean, you spoke in a radio column a few years ago about an advancing ethno-pluralism.
Yeah, that's
can you explain what?
Yeah, that's the ideology of the extreme right, which means there's a good expression for this in Swedish: lika barn lika bäst. So you sort the word out according to ethnicity. Now, these people will say that we are not for one. We don't think one people is superior to another. Everybody is equal. They don't think so, but that's what they say. So this is a new way of manifesting, I would say, racial superiority. But they call it ethnic pluralism, and it's again they think that society can only work well where people of the same background, ethnicity, cultural live separate from the others. This is absolutely.
Yeah.
This is to me. It's
Yeah.
not only disgusting, but it's not practical. It's not going to work. Then.
No, I think in this piece you took the example of Benjamin Netanyahu.
Did I?
Yeah, you did.
He's gone now. Hopefully.
Yeah. But when he talked about Israel is not for all.
Yeah, well, the Israeli special case. It's the ethnic nation par preference today. Unfortunately, I don't like that.
No.
It has become so. So that's what everybody sort of Orban and all these admire Israel. Israel is doing what they want to do.
Yeah.
Namely, sort of define the state, the nation, basically in an ethnic way. It's an ethnic. Someone, what's her name? Eva Illush has called it an ethnocracy, not a democracy, an ethnocracy, which it is.
Yeah, and Putin uses it offensive instead.
Putin is doing the same with the mother Russia and the true Russia and
true Russians. Now let us talk a bit about your latest book, Rabbi Marcus Ehrenpreis obesvarad kärlek, The Unrequited Love of Rabbi Marcus Ehrenpreis.
Right.
That will be the title in English.
I hope so. I'm translating it. So it will.
When will the translation come out?
I don't know when I've finished it.
Oh.
But it will. I have a publisher in America, so it's my old publisher. So
Okay.
Let's hope so. I think may I do some advertising. I think it's worthwhile reading. But the best issue, the best publication of this book will always be Swedish. This is my language. So whatever English it will be.
Well, it's a really fascinating book. I mean, you start looking at it and you become afraid because it's so big, but heavy stuff. But as soon as you get into it, it's opening a world of ideas and universal questions, really. Yeah. About nationality, belonging, minorities, normalization of inhumanity, and the importance of words, the use of concepts to control our attitudes and opinions. It's really fascinating. It's a fascinating history that points to our present and the future. What led you to enter into this huge research project? Okay. I mean, it's huge.
Yeah, I won't go into that. It became larger than I had expected. I have to say that. I didn't know the guy enough beforehand, but there was some intuitive ideas that I had why I wanted to explore my Jewish ancestry, my Jewish past, and I eventually found that Ehrenpreis would be the right person to do that because I needed to find something in my Jewish ancestry that I liked, that I was born Jewish to survivors of the Holocaust. It was not on the map that I would say, no, I don't want to be Jewish. I want to do something. No, I have to be. It's my fate, but it's also because of that very strong link to the Holocaust. But then I really also wanted to find something that wanted me to be Jewish, that I liked with it. I already sensed that what I was looking for, and this book is an exploration of that strand in Judaism through Ehrenpreis. But it also becomes, of course, a European history, a Swedish history. Yeah. It also becomes a history of a time that is very much like this one.
Tell us a bit about what you found that you liked to be part of.
Well, to put it very, very short, brief, I found a tradition that, and has always been there, of Judaism and Jewry as an ethnic commitment. It's an vad heter det, förbundet,
The Covenant?
No, vad heter förbundet vid Sinai på engelska?
The Covenant.
No, the Covenant, you see. Covenant. Getting old. The Covenant as it was a covenant between God and Israel, but in Ehrenpreis' version, it was a covenant in which Israel was the carrier of a universal ethic, moral impulse into the world. Well, the Ten Commandments everyone knows, but everything else too. He was very convinced that by strengthening this impulse in Judaism, he talked very much about a Jewish Renaissance. He talked very much about renewing a Jewish literary and cultural impulse in the world. He thought that that would again influence the world, because he also interpreted this impulse in Judaism as an impulse for peace, or universal peace, the messianic component, the prophetic idea that eventually humanity has to end up in a kind of universal brotherhood. And in the times when he was doing this, was all these wars, all these bloodsheds, all these, and he saw the skies darkening literally, and he thought that if I could make my brand of Judaism and bridge it to the Christian world, which has been for thousands of years sort of denigrating Jews and Judaism, treating it and seeing it as an enemy basically, and Jews as evil people, then things might change. It was a bit desperate. It was very idealistic, very romantic. I'm saying it was that, but he went about it. He went about it with a certain
very diligent,
yeah. And wrote books, and he wrote them in Swedish. He came here at the age of 45, having never learned any Swedish, seen any, and he became a Swedish writer. And he wrote books in Swedish, and he got reviews in all the newspapers. He was compared to Joseph Conrad, and as the one who masters suddenly a new language. So this is this. And also, and maybe this will be a good conclusion. He never saw the Jewish existence as a minority, as an anomaly. He thought he supported the creation of a cultural and spiritual center in Palestine. He thought Judaism needed that, and there were people in Eastern Europe that literally needed a place to go after the pogroms of the early 1900s. But he saw the future of Judaism was in the world, and the future of Jews in the diaspora, and was to be a people among people, and that's why he so emphatically engaged himself in the issue of minorities, because he thought that in the world that is emerging of nation states and moving borders here and there, we may all become minorities. Minority status is not something abnormal, something to do away with, but something that we have to learn to live with and organize the world around. So this is, if you look at the world today, I think this is as
I read you or read the book, it's like Marcus Ehrenpreis is the antithesis of Benjamin Netanyahu.
Absolutely, absolutely.
He regards himself as Zionist, I think.
Yeah,
regarded himself, Ehrenpreis.
Yeah, he's called it cultural Zionism.
Yes.
I mean, I explained the difference.
Yeah.
So he
didn't see any geographical borders and state building as important.
No. That was what he said was the future of Judaism will not be saved by a piece of land and by us becoming a people like everybody else with an army and all that. No. That the task of Judaism and the raison d'être for Jews was a spiritual task and a spiritual heritage. And if this got lost, as he thought, then was no meaning of. Then it was no point in having that state or a. So that we have to see him in this is pre-Holocaust. We have to remember this is the 20s, the 30s, and then of course everything changes.
But didn't he, even after the Holocaust, wasn't he still of the same conviction?
Yeah. I do write about the debate that is having with another interesting person, the historian Hugo Valentin, who has his center here in Uppsala, about that. And that is January 1945, March 45, sorry.
Oh my God.
Before. And he still maintains, yes, but there is no point in Palestine if we cannot save the spiritual heritage of Judaism. And he was adamant at that.
He's returning to Sinai all the time, the agreement with God.
Yeah, the covenant and the prophets and all that.
Yeah.
Well, to get all the nitty-gritty details told by me, then it's all in the book. But it's not only that. But that was what drew me to him. And along the road, I came to like him. Sometimes I thought he was a bit uppy and a bit, filled by himself. And that's always, you write biographies, you sometimes wonder, about this guy. But eventually I come to like him.
Yeah. Me as well. He seems to be a beautiful person.
Yeah, well, yeah. I don't say, I'm not saying I made him beautiful, but I took out the beautiful in him.
Yeah.
And I mention some other things too, but I find them of minor importance, especially since his aftermath, his reputation or whatever, eftermäle, became very dark.
Yeah.
And we don't have to go into that. And I wanted to save him from that.
But that is very important for a Swedish audience. If you've heard of him, they got it wrong.
Yeah, the thing was told that he and the Swedish Jews didn't do enough to help the fleeing German and Austrian Jews. Actually, they didn't want to have them at all, which was totally rubbish. And I tried to show in the book what actually they did, what they actually could do, and above all, what they could not do, because Sweden at the time in the 30s was a very anti-Jewish country in that sense. And I don't have to mention the Uppsala möte and Lund möte with the students who said no to 10 Jewish doctors. And it was the Swedish government who asked the Germans to stamp a J in the Jewish passports of Germans. So what could the Jews of Sweden do? They had, that was... And I tried to describe the enormous moral dilemma, the moral pressures that they were in. But, you will have
reading Enterprise, it makes you wonder where Göran Rosenberg ends up with it when it comes to Heimat, because Enterprise, I get him as he is striving for a Heimat, a kind of community that is without geographical borders, but is built on moral.
Yeah, that's the Jewish community. But at the same time, it was very important.
But he invites also others.
Of course. Yeah. But at the same time, he has this firm idea that you could be a Jew with a community that is basically spiritual and cultural, and still be part of the society in which you live, a full Swede. He said you can be 100% that and 100% that. He saw no contradiction. And I still think that is a proper position to take. You could be different in many ways and still be 100% part of the society in which you live and be completely loyal to it.
You made a documentary series many years ago about Swedish identity. Do you remember that one? Is it too long ago?
Yeah, no. I do remember.
What did you find? Is there a Swedish identity? Do you find that there is a Swedish identity? I mean, you're part of it.
Yeah, I rarely use the word identity. I have to. Someone said that I had written a book about identity. I looked it up. There's once in the whole. Once in the whole. No, because it has so many connotations that I don't like. My identity, your identity. Yeah. It's a word that separates more. I think one identity is the one I cling to, and that's the human identity. Yeah. But no, I don't. It's just facetious. No, but I think we have to.
It's on the agenda.
Be aware. Yeah, but we need rootedness. This is what I'm talking about. We need to know from where we come, where we belong. All this, I think, I really affirm. I think this is really important, and we have neglected it. The difficulty in becoming a human being, which means be socialized into a particular setting, always. There's no being human in general. But I hate to see identity turned into kind of a shield or a flag this is my identity and this is this. Yeah. Stop talking about it. Just act the way you wish to act, do what you wish to act. Don't label it unnecessarily.
No.
I know this is really out of date to say these things today, but I think so.
Okay. Many would think that the search for identity is very much on the agenda. As you see it, is the question, as I get you, you don't think that question leads the wrong way. When you pose the question, what is my identity? Almost there you're going wrong.
Yeah, I understand the search for it, because I think there is a longing for, as I said, rootedness, a longing for knowing, there is a sense of upheaval in our societies that leave people with a sense of, disconnectedness. I think social media, has to do with this also. People connect not with their close in the way that sort of the kind of human connections close human connections that are formative in that sense. But I don't want to generalize here. I'm just saying we have to be aware that what we first of all have to pay attention to are the tendencies to make ourselves more strange to each other than we need be. Why? Okay, we are different. We should be different. That's fine. Let's celebrate that we are different. But to make that difference a claim to special treatment, maybe sometimes that's warranted, but normally not. Because we have laws that are supposed to treat everyone equally. And if they are not treated equally, we should, raise hell.
Yeah.
But not to make claims, let's say, of separate rules or separate this or separate... This I don't like.
Rabbi Ehrenpreis was born, as you've mentioned, in the town that we see a lot of in the news nowadays, Lviv in Ukraine, or Lemberg, as the name was when he was born. He then spent years of his life stationed all over Europe, Germany, Poland, the Balkans, Bulgaria, and he learned the languages, and eventually Sweden. What do you think he would answer if he could, if he got the question where his real homeland was? What would he say? What do you think? What's your real home?
I don't think he would like that question.
No.
No, especially not the word real. I don't think he would buy that question. This is a question of today. No. He made, truly, I think, he wanted to make, and I think he did make Sweden. He called it not his homeland or father, he called it my Kinderland. My new Kinderland, he called it, because it was 45 when he came. But he fell in love with the Swedish language. He says so explicitly. He learned it fast. He was a genius in language, that's for sure. And there is so much in his writing that is Swedish. It's amazing. And he really absorbs that in a way. And people who read him sees that and appreciates that. And in that way, he's an example, I think, of exactly the ideal that he promoted. He called it cultural dualism. You can be a meeting point of cultures, and it's good for everybody. And this is really his credo, which he lives by and through. Cultural dualism, and he picks it up from history, and he sees in that a great inspiration. And he believes, to a certain point, in this kind of revival in the world of this a word of cultural interaction. Many Jews believe that. You can laugh at it now, but they believe that would be possible. That Europe of the late 19th century, 20th century would give that possibility. That would be a new era of blossoming. Many people believe that especially Germany and the Jews would have a special love affair. It's true. Many believe that.
There are, as I've read now, but this is perhaps parenthetical, but now you have some migration from Israel to Germany.
Yeah.
You've seen that?
Yeah.
What's that
Well,
about?
Israel is developing into an ethnic state with a very right-wing climate, and I can understand that many Israelis don't feel at home. And many have. There has been a new revival of diaspora and Judaism
Yeah.
and the diaspora ideal, and people are harking back to that in America, in Germany. I think that's good,
Yeah.
in my view, because it goes where
But this idea of dualism and be able to embrace both the culture, community that you have from birth, and the country where you live, and so on and so forth, did it come to a halt through the Second World War? This
Yeah.
thought tradition that Aaron Price is an example.
Yeah, I think so. I think the Holocaust, the physical and spiritual destruction of European Jewry and whatever remained was not was damaged forever, or at least so. And Israel radiated much more future optimism, which was another solution, was another way.
Yeah.
Let's say those who had argued that the Jews need a country of their own, with their own army and their own protection and all what that entailed.
It's understandable.
At that time it was, and Aaron Price in that sense was also not forgotten. Yeah, he was forgotten. So what he represented didn't have a voice anymore. As I say in the book, doesn't mean it was wrong. It just didn't succeed. And as I say, as my also in declaration I make, I don't think the losers of history always were wrong. They just didn't succeed. Not all losing ideas were bad ideas. And this is still what I believe. So I don't think that history, I don't think that the victor writes history.
No.
Well, I would say the victor writes history, but I think there is another history to be written, and the history of the losers could be as interesting.
And you've done that.
Yeah, this is the history of a loser. Yeah.
But you are exactly as, not exactly as, but you have also been stationed around the world, in the United States for a long time, for example. Did you reflect on
Emigrating?
how to feel at home there?
Yeah, I like
Did
it.
you?
In a different sense, but I always knew that this was a limited period. I'm not the correspondent type. I wouldn't like to live my life as a
Jumping around the world.
itinerating. No. Yeah, I'm very place bound person. So I really wanted to come home. They asked me to stay a bit longer, but I knew I just would prolong it would increase.
Why? Why didn't you want to stay?
I wasn't an American.
Uh-huh.
And
You didn't feel American
no.
after 4 years, or?
No, I'm very familiar with America.
Yeah.
And no, to me it was a strange, and the more I got to know it, the stranger it became.
Okay. So
I'm fascinated by it. I think very few people understand how multifaceted it is. So many things there are.
Yeah.
And this fascinated me all the time. You could take the car, go 2 hours in one direction and another, and you're in another world.
Yeah.
Basically, with different people.
But isn't the United States as a nation, if you could talk about it, the United States of America as one nation, but isn't it a good example of how multiculturalism succeeds?
It was. I'm afraid now that it will not succeed. Yes. Yeah. Well, that's what.
So the underlying,
it
wasn't so good as we thought.
Well, it could only take so much beating, so much malevolent politicians, so much demagoguery, so much social crackpot media. And this is ripping it apart, because it is, as you say, it's a continent, and it's very diverse, and all these states have their own rules and all laws and all customs and so forth and so on. So people don't understand. Many understand, but you have to understand this is not a society like others. It's a continent. It's huge. Yeah. It spans socially, culturally from Africa to Europe. I mean, you go south, Go north, different words.
But still, if you're an American patriot, you can be born in Maine, or you could be born in West Virginia. You have the same flag.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's
some
sort of nation.
Yeah, absolutely. And what makes America work is that this attachment to the larger America is a working one, but a very weak one. It's a superficial one. It has been sustained by, I have to say, wars to some extent, certain and also by sports.
Oh yeah.
If you don't understand the role of sports in America, you don't understand how that society works. That is really what unites America. You can go into any bar, any place, anywhere in America, and sit down, and there is Monday Night Football, and we are all a family.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. But why do you think is that some kind of ideal for Europe to strive to, that we have a united Europe, so to say? With
I am a federalist because I think that's the way of organizing democratic society, diverse democratic societies. It's a difficult way. It's a difficult thing to do. Germany is a federal republic. America is a federation. I think Europe could be one too. They are all different. Europe would have been completely different, with much more difference within it. A big problem with a European federation, a political level, is language. So we have managed. We have managed. There was many attempts to create sort of all European newspapers, but you have to know, in America there are not that many either. People, there are I think there's one newspaper you could call maybe all American. It's or maybe USA Today, but New York Times. But it's a very localized society. People know only what happens around them, basically.
Yeah. And as a naive observer of the European experiment, you thought, or I thought for a while, that why can't they all learn English? And then suddenly the only native English-speaking people left.
No,
Brexit.
Brexit. Yeah.
So that's out of the question right now.
Yeah.
Have an English union. Okay.
I think we should learn. We should be good. Learn French and German in Sweden again.
Yeah.
Better. I think that's. I think no, really, but also because I've just spent time in Germany, and it's a fascinating. It's another universe, and if you have language, you are really enriched. I think Sweden should open its eyes and minds also to Europe, which we don't. We look west.
Yeah, we look over the big sea.
Yeah, we look over the big sea.
We want to be little American. Yeah.
I wouldn't be gone past our time.
No,
I don't know.
It's really strange.
Someone is going to.
It seems as though we haven't. But
I don't know.
Maybe we'll end.
I just want to. No. I don't want to.
No, but
to overstay my visit.
Yes.
No, I don't want to. Okay, shall I read from the book? A little bit.
That would be nice.
A little piece.
A little piece.
And I read from the beginning.
Yes.
1 minute or two.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's the book.
Okay, that was sweet of you, Jolod.
Good idea, Jolod.
Ooh, the previous book, which is that, I read a lot because I think it makes for reading. This is more, but this is okay.
But do it.
Okay.
So this will be in Swedish.
This is in Swedish. It will be in English, but not now. Vi föddes in i det judiska, både du och jag. Du när så många judiska vägar fortfarande syntes öppna. Jag när så många judiska vägar hade stängts. Du när så mycket fanns att bryta upp från och göra upp med och gjuta nytt liv i. Jag när så mycket judiskt liv var förintat. Och frågan på allvar kunde ställas om det judiska ens var möjligt längre. Det judiska hade det svårt redan när du föddes in i det, det vet ju du om någon. Men din tids judiska vägar var vägar från mörker till ljus, från villrådighet till klarhet, från förnedring till upprättelse, från förtvivlan till hopp. Eller för att tala med ditt språk, från judendomens pånyttfödelse till världens förlossning, vilket är en mycket judisk väg onekligen. Förbundet, utvaldheten, profeterna, Messias och allt det där. Jag återkommer. Men när jag föddes in i det judiska och du bara hade några år kvar att leva och det inte fanns någon väg förbi Auschwitz, var det svårare att föreställa sig judendomens pånyttfödelse och än mindre världens förlossning och därmed svårare att föreställa sig den fortsatta meningen med det judiska överhuvudtaget. En mening återstod förstås. Och du såg den tränga undan alla andra meningar i takt med att det judiska reducerades till ras och judar reducerades till föremål för förintelse och judisk mening reducerades till judars överlevnad. Men för dig fanns ingen judisk mening i överlevnad enbart. För dig kunde det judiska bara ha en mening om det judiska förbundet med Gud överlevde. Vilket så småningom tvingade dig att se en mening också i Auschwitz. Det som överlever denna olycksdigra tid, det som helbrägda kunna rädda sig ur de sammanstörtade ruinerna, komma med ett klar blick, rena hjärtan och oförsvaga tro att delta i uppbyggandet av en bättre och lyckligare värld. Skrev du i december 1943, när den judiska värld som du hade fötts in i var på väg att förintas och överlevnad var det enda som gällde. Men vad annat kunde du göra? Slänga Israels Gud på sophögen. Ta tillbaka allt du hade sagt och skrivit och trott på i hela ditt liv. Tala om för din ännu skonade flock i Stockholms synagoga att också du hade förlorat tron på det judiska. Nej, det kunde du inte. Att tro på det judiska, det måste du intala såväl din församling som dig själv. Var att tro på en Gud som var närvarande också i sin allt mer provocerande frånvaro.
And on that Swedish note, we'll end our conversation today. But first, the rabbi's word of wisdom. The future has a long past. Thank you, Göran Rosenberg, for making a historical figure and his currently important thoughts possible, open, and more humane Heimat available to us. Thank you for a book that, despite its focus on history, has much to say about the debate about our current national selfishness in humanity and refugee reception. Thank you so much. Thank you, Göran.
Thank you, Mikael.
You're a good guy.
You're a good guy too.
Yeah, good. You write good books. Okay.
Yeah.
And for our international guests, please, this novel is this book is beautiful. A brief stop on the way from Auschwitz. Yeah. It's a great book.
And may I add, maybe Cecilia will say that there are obviously apparently books.
Yes,
downstairs, and I will go down there after this. And if anyone wants to buy one, and even if anyone wants me to sign, I can be there for a little while.
Very good.
Before I.
Yeah. So please, all of you that wants the book, go one flight of stairs downstairs. No.
Okay.
Okay. And I should also say that you should not miss the next fascinating event, because all the way from Germany. There's Judith Shalansky, a truly original author, about who will talk about lost memories and the longing for other places. So please be here at 8 o'clock. Okay? Thank you. Oh, you får den av mig.